Being able to connect with someone without having a translator, specifically between two races that historically have missed or been caused to mistrust each other, really did help. Being able to listen and understand, listen and respond, to being able to participate in social media discussions on forums where it's only in isiZulu. Those things help. Breaks that barrier.
Ek is Pieter Steyn. Kom ons gesels land en sand. Chris Pappas, die burgemeester van Howick, van uMngeni, Hilton, Nottingham Road, al hierdie mooi skilderagtige plekke in die Natalse Middelande. Baie dankie dat jy tyd ingeruim het dat ons vandag met jou kan gesels.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Chris, kom ons begin met, jy het hier by Mooirivier rond groot geword. Vertel ons daarvan.
Yeah, not far from here, just up the road in Mooirivier. Actually in Giant's Castle, which is still another 30 minutes from the small town. But spent many of my childhood years here. I've got family in the area, family businesses, went to high school, all the like. So yeah, born and bred local.
Het jy van kleins af al in die politiek belang gestel?
Growing up, I knew farming, I knew small town things, and when I got to university, I knew that there was two political parties at that stage, the ANC and the IFP. That was about the extent of my political knowledge. My family's non-political. I'm the only person involved in politics. So yeah, no, not at all. I didn't even know what it was about.
Vertel ons bietjie van jou ouers.
Yeah, they're still out on the farm. They're obviously getting on in their years now, so not as active as they were. I don't think my dad will be listening, so I can say he still thinks he's a very serious farmer. But he's obviously scaled down over the years, but is still very active. We started with a stud farm. The area that I come from is very well known for horses and equestrian. So my family is involved in horse racing. And then slowly over the years changed to beef cattle, soybeans, potatoes, maize, the like. And I still keep my herd of goats. I have boer goats out on the farm that I keep as a hobby out there. But yeah, they're still out there and doing very well.
Jou ouers het ook 'n hondekosfabriek gehad en jy het toe daar 'n bynaam gekry in Zoeloe.
Yeah. So I used to go to the factory every evening. You know, they couldn't leave me at home. So I used to come in a small carry pram, and I had a very big head as a child. It was big and red because I'm very white. So it was big and red, and they said I looked like the factory workers said I looked like a gundan, which is a rat, one of those small pink rats that you find. So I was gundan. You still know the people who knew me growing up because they still call me that. So whether it was my friends from school or friends from the farm, you know I've got a long history with you if you call me by that name, and that we go back a long way.
Is it also on the farm that you learned to speak Zulu?
100%. You know, it was either speak to people in Zulu or nothing. This part of KZN is largely Zulu and English speaking. So those are the two languages that I grew up with. I mean, my dad comes from Nelspruit. So he was the hoofseun at law school in Nelspruit. And so somewhere along the line, I lost my Afrikaans. But Zulu is where I spent most of my time. People ask, where did you learn? I said, well, I didn't really learn. I can speak it. Where did you learn your Afrikaans or your English? Just at home, speaking with everyone. So yeah, and then I studied it at school. I did Afrikaans till grade 9, and then for matric I wrote French and Zulu. So then I learned how to read and write it as well, which has been hugely beneficial for the career that I've gone into.
And brothers and sisters?
Yeah, younger sister. Very, very different from me. I'm a schedule, to-do list, put it in my diary type of guy. And my sister's barefoot, long hair, sleep out in the mountain if she needs to. Very free-spirited, beautiful human being. But a younger sister who's on the farm with my parents and doing stuff with horses, doing stuff with plants as well.
Baie interessant vir my oor Zulu spesifiek, en ek dink jy het al daaraan geraak, is dat Zulu nie direk vertaal noodwendig kan word nie. Daar's woorde wat 'n omvattende betekenis het en kulturele betekenis ook het. Ek dink jy het byvoorbeeld een keer verwys na hlonipha.
So I think it's the same in any language. There's direct translations, and then there's particular words that have a cultural meaning or a significance, a weight to them. And the word hlonipha is the word directly translated is respect. But it's not respect like we would know it in sort of Western heritage, but it's got a significance to it around ancestry, around hierarchy, around subservience, around appropriateness. So I think all languages are like that. There are words that you can never truly translate with another word. And, you know, it goes back, I mean, Nelson Mandela said it, and it's maybe a true reflection of it, around being able to speak someone's language, but also being able to hear someone. And when you can hear someone, it's really ingrained in that word. So yeah, I think being able to speak isiZulu, but not just from a textbook, but having grown up with it, you can really land feeling empathy without having to translate it, if that makes sense.
Can you speak Greek?
No, not at all. I mean, I used to listen to my uncle, my grandfather to a lesser extent, and my dad at Christmas and Easter, singing these crazy Greek songs and getting loud, and you know, there's lots of brandy and lots of whiskey and beers and whatever. And as the nights and the festivities continue, all the Greek songs come out, and most of the siblings don't know what the heck they're saying. But it's fun nonetheless to watch the old buggers doing their thing.
Jy was hier op Hilton College op skool. Dit is deesdae een van die duurste skole in Suid-Afrika. Het jy dit geniet op skool?
So yeah, I mean, Hilton is just down the road here. It's part of this municipality as well. So I guess I've come full circle. But it's a yes and a no answer. I mean, I was extremely privileged to go to that school, and the resources and the opportunities that come with that. So I'll never dismiss that. But there are certain things around the school culture that don't necessarily align with myself. It's a very elitist school, or was. I mean, there's a lot of changes that have taken place, and kudos to them for moving with the times. But it is a very elitist culture. It's very Joburg, right? You know, there's not huge amounts of people from KwaZulu-Natal there. It's got this culture about it that I didn't necessarily enjoy. But within that same setting, there are great friends that you make, great connections that you make, experiences that you have. So I can't throw the baby out with the bathwater to say, well, you know, because of the school's culture or its elitist in nature, that I didn't enjoy it completely. But yeah, I think it's a bit of both.
Wat 'n soort kind was jy? Was jy 'n gehoorsame kind of 'n rebel?
I suppose if you ask my mother, she would give you one story. If you ask my teachers, they would give you a different. I think I was an adventurous child. I was always trying to do as much as possible. You know, later on in years, someone had a saying, or it was in a speech or something, the more you have to do, the more you get done. And I think that's always been my philosophy. And at school, I was like that. Or growing up as a child, I was like that. Always busy. You know, my mother would come and look for me on the farm at 7, 8 o'clock at night in winter, and by that time it's dark. And I'd completely lose track of time and be doing 100 different things. And at school, the same thing. You know, I did more subjects than I had to do. I was in more clubs and played more sports than I had to. The security guards on campus at school used to, they were supposed to catch you if you were out after curfew. You know, 8 o'clock, everyone must be in your house. But I'd be often walking between the different buildings at like 10 o'clock at night. And they knew me, so they were fine with that. And they were like, no, I've just come from the choir, and I'm going to gumboot dancing, and then from there I'm going to the next place. And they're like, oh no, we know, it's fine. And they'd let me go. So busy, I think, is the way that describes that.
En na skool toe is jy nou na die Universiteit van Pretoria toe en jy het stad- en streekbeplanning gaan studeer.
Yeah, Tukkies for 4 years. 5 years in Pretoria, but 4 years at Tukkies.
And you studied
Town and regional planning, yeah.
And is that where you got involved in politics, or how did it work?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't because of town planning. It just happened to be the friendship group that I made along the way, and you know, circumstances that led to that. So, as I said, when I got to university, I knew nothing about politics. I didn't even know the DA existed at that stage. Don't tell Helen; she'll get very upset. Some of the friends that I made were from Cope. At that time, Cope was just sort of starting out, and you know, I think we were running for the first election or second election. And yeah, some of the friends that I made, specifically in Yule. So there are a lot of people in the Yule and the RAG committee who were involved, and I was very active there. But they went sort of from Yule into the Student Representative Council, and a lot of them were from either the DA Students Organisation. I think there was the PAC, SASCO, COPE. There's the international students. Yeah, and then my friends were in COPE, and that's how I got involved in the COPE student movement, where then I was elected onto the SRC. And it was a coalition SRC, There was a couple of political parties. It was DASO and the PAC and the ANC, not the Youth League, SASCO. So there's a few of us, completely different to, I mean, if that was the national government at the time, people would have lost their minds to say, how can the DA and the ANC and the PAC and everyone, but it was student politics, so it was very different. But yeah, I was the representative for academic affairs, so that was my portfolio.
And then how did you got involved into the DA?
So once I started to get involved in politics, you then start to learn about it. Political parties have constitutions and structures and processes and people and values and policies. So a political party is not just the leader at the time giving a speech or an election cycle. They're very complex things that you get to learn about. And I started doing that learning. And COPE was unraveling, and you learn why it was unraveling. And you've been exposed to these other political parties and what they stand for and how they do things. And it was then I started to move or gravitate towards the DA. I reached out to my ward councillor. I was staying in Linwood at the time, Pretoria East. And it was Siobhan Miller was my councillor. And I said, well, I'd like to get involved. I don't know much about any politics outside of here. And she said, no, come along. And she basically used me as slave labor. She made me stand at the tables and hand out leaflets and do all the things that she had done, 30 years ago. And that's how I slowly started to get involved in the DA. And then later on, I saw a job advert. I was busy working for a development company, my first job out of varsity, and I wasn't really enjoying it for various reasons. And I saw this job advert back in KZN. There were two actually adverts, and it was for what was at the time called an operations manager. So the DA divides the country into operational units, and there was one for the centre of Johannesburg, including universities, and one for the south of Durban, Mlazi, Amanzimtoti, all those areas. And I applied for both, and the guys from Johannesburg said, yep, we'll employ you after the interview process. And a day before I signed the contract, the guys from KZN called me to do me an interview, because we're a federal party, so it works separately. And they poached me, and I saw the opportunity to come back home because I'm through and through KZN boy. And I said, no, I'm coming back home. So I turned down the job offer in Johannesburg and came down to Durban. Literally, they wanted me. It was something like a month before the 2014 elections, national elections, and they wanted me there within a week. So packed up everything onto a trailer, and with my beagle, my dog, in the car, and we headed down to Durban. I actually didn't even have a place to stay. I was driving around Musgrave with my trailer and my car looking for for rent signs, because that's how urgently they wanted me. But yeah, that's how I got involved in the DA, and have slowly progressed from a staff member or a volunteer first to a staff member, a councillor, a member of the provincial parliament or legislature, back to a councillor as mayor. So that's been my progression.
En die tyd wat jy nou in diens was van die DA as 'n beampte wat jy nou beskryf het vir die suide van Durban, dink jy dit was 'n goeie leerskool in die politiek en in die DA kultuur om uiteindelik dan nou aan te gaan na 'n provinsiale wetgewerslid en so aan?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the areas that I looked after were so diverse. So I mean, I wasn't involved in politics. I didn't have to stand for positions and all those things. The role was support for the politicians. Bring the membership books, take the T-shirts, all the admin stuff. And the communities were Chatsworth, which is predominantly Indian. It was Mlazi, which is predominantly Black Zulu speaking. It was Amanzimtoti, which is Afrikaans speaking. And then it was the rural areas, which is traditional authorities around Mkababa, Mkomas, all those areas. So every day was this just complete kaleidoscope of diversity, from rich, poor, different races, even Chatsworth. You've got Muslims, you've got Tamil, you've got Hindi, you've got rich, you've got poor, you've got informal settlements in between. And I mean, it was just this amazing exposure to the diversity of working in politics. And I think a silly example, but you'd be organizing an event. Politicians would want, some public meeting or whatever it is, and they would be catering for that meeting. You'd have to make sure that you had vegetarian, you had for the Hindus, you had for the Muslims, you also had for those people who didn't do, who are diabetic, because it was for senior citizens. And you just, there right in front of you was the organization of something that tried to represent everyone in practical terms. So all of those little things, the viewpoints, the debates, the battle for resources, where should they go? And all of that, engagements with people as well. The expectations that different cultures have. Don't say no to that auntie when you're knocking on her door and she's going to give you yesterday's curry or she's made fresh samosas. Don't say no. Go in there, eat, and I promise you when you get to the next door, it's the same thing. Or if you're sitting at the pub in a Amanzimtoti and that worm's like one more beer and you say no, it's very disrespectful. Have another beer with him, right? So wherever you are. And you just learn those things. You learn about people, and even though how different we are, how similar we actually are as South Africans. But yeah, long answer, but I loved that part of the job. My first day at work, picked up my laptop and my printer, and that we still had cameras back then. It wasn't camera phones. That's how old I am. And I went into Umlazi because I was employed. I started work on the Monday. On that Saturday, Helen Ziller was coming to do, and she was still the party leader at the time, coming to do some event in Umlazi. So myself and Tembiso Ngema, who was the person in charge of that area, the councillor, we went to go find the venue because she wanted it must be in an informal settlement and it must be this and this, and there was criteria. So we parked my car at the top of the hill and we can see the place the field that we're going to go look at the bottom. And we walk, an hour and a half later, we come back. The window in my car is broken, laptop gone, everything gone. First day, had to phone the boss and say, listen, Alma Rabe, she was my boss. First day on the job, but everything's gone. And, it was sort of a rude awakening to, you've got to be alert at all times. Not just for crime, but situational awareness of where you are in this job, in politics. And it's still the same today. As wherever you are, you've got to be situationally aware to the threats, the risks, the opportunities, whatever it might be.
Die oorgang van 'n amptenaar van die party na 'n openbare verteenwoordiger, 'n lid van die wetgewer, stadsraadlid en so aan. Hoe was daai oorgang vir jou?
So I was in the legislature at the time, and I was quite happy there. I was spokesperson for agriculture. And I was enjoying it. I mean, that's where I grew up doing that. So I used to travel around the province and visit small farmers, big farmers, and do all the things. And I was enjoying championing their issues. And I was quite satisfied that I was going to do 5 years and then I'd be done and I'd go out into the private sector and do something else. Applications for the councillorship here came. I mean, this is now after eThekwini. There it was just a matter of they needed someone, and I was living in the area, and they said, no, you need to do this for us because there's no one else. So I guess fate dictated that trajectory into the Durban Council. But then to become a councillor again here, I said I didn't even apply. The mayorship came and went, the applications, I didn't apply, they didn't get enough applicants, or they weren't happy with the applicants, so they reopened it, and friends and family said I must apply. So I went from a councillor in Durban, which was by chance, to a second chance becoming a councillor again here in uMngeni.
Ek wil nou juist praat oor uMngeni. Die verkiesing in 2021, toe die DA die eerste keer hier oorgeneem het, jy die burgemeester geword het, jy was in daai stadium 32 jaar oud, ek dink dit was, of is nog steeds seker een van die jongste burgemeesters in die land, of die jongste. Daai aand wat die uitslaa ingekom het, en jy gesien het, die munisipaliteit word blou, as ek het so kan stel. Wat het deur jou kop gegaan?
Sure. In politics, with any election, you've got one chance. It's not like a sports match where next weekend we'll play them again, or let's reset the men on the chess table and play another game. You have one chance, and it starts at 7 o'clock in the morning and finishes at 9 o'clock at night. So you sit there at 9 o'clock when the voting stations have closed, completely exhausted. People don't really know what goes into an election. It's a science, and there's a lot that goes into it. So you're completely exhausted, and all you've done for the last 6 months is run a popularity contest, essentially, to tell people why you're the best, why you're better than the other guy, how useless that other oak is, and that's all it is, to try and get people to vote for you. And then the counting starts, and slowly it comes in, and it's verified, and it's like this roller coaster, because you can't predict it. So exhausted, sitting on my couch, the roller coaster of 6 or 7 hours of vote counting started as the results came in. And I often refer to, I think it's News 24, has they call it an election map. They still have it today. And as the results come in, they sit there in the IEC centre and the map changes. And our map kept changing from blue to yellow to, I think it's like grey or something like that. Grey was hung council. Blue being DA and yellow being ANC. So it was yellow, and then it changed to grey, then blue, then yellow. And you sit and you watch this changing. And you sit there with your Excel spreadsheet and all your volunteers on the day. We had 600 people volunteer, not paid, people who volunteered, community members like, no, we're going to come out and make this machine work. Drive the aunties who haven't got cars and knock on the doors of the people who are having braai day instead of coming to vote, and manning the voting station, counting the votes to make sure that people don't cheat us. And what News 24 is saying doesn't add up to my spreadsheet. And then the national office starts phoning you. And they're saying, but the numbers we got here, they're the same as your numbers. Drive to the voting station, go and check. So you phone the next person, go and check, because they publish the voting results on the voting station door. You're like, no, what your volunteers sent me is not the same. Go and take a picture, send it, let's double check it. And we were literally telling the IEC, go and recheck what you've been sent. And then eventually the map stayed grey. And the News 24 said, declared. And you sat there and said, well, okay. News 24 is not the authority on it, so we're still waiting for the IEC, but it says 100% voting done. It's great. It's a hung municipality. I think it was 12 to the DA, 10 to the ANC, 2 to the EFF, and 1 to the IFP, something like that. And then 10 minutes later, it changed, and so it went blue. And in between all of this, it's chaos. It's you have the national campaign manager phoning you, you have the party leader phoning you. Everyone's just saying, is it right? Go check, do this. It's not adding up, and then it goes blue. And at that point, it sort of just like sinks in, because now what the IEC matches News 24 matches what we have on paper, and we're saying, okay, well, clearly we won this now. And this just weight falls on you, because then the phone starts to ring with other people. Then it's journalists. Because the big metros only come in 2 or 3 days later, and then the journalists start coming. And it wasn't a great election for the DA in general. We were coming out of sort of the 2019 slumps and all of those issues, and the party was looking for a good story, and this was obviously a good story in KZN. So the communications office in Cape Town and Joburg were just handing out my number to every journalist that was asking. And so I spent sort of from 3 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon answering journalists, about how we're suddenly going to convert little old Howick to Cape Town, because that's the expectation now within 6 hours of the results coming in. But exciting, nerve-wracking, historic, all those words come to mind.
Jy het nie daai verkiesing gewen net oornag nie. Dit het 'n baie lang aanloop oor jare eintlik, dink ek. Jy het op die oomblik met 42 stemme gewen, dink ek.
It was 18 years. That's how long the process was. So I can't claim that it was me who won it. It was seriously a team effort over 18 years. And I don't think people realize how long these things take. You're building a reputation and trust and all the like. But under a gentleman by the name of Greg Crumbrock, he was the national campaign manager. He was the national campaign manager, but also the head of this area. He lived here. He passed away at the end of the last elections because of a heart attack. But he started that work, building the structures, getting a good culture in place, making sure that things like factionalism and infighting, that wasn't a local culture, making sure that the message and the policies and everything was local, and then doing the hard slog of going from 26% to 19% to 13 to 11 to 9, constantly just making it less and less. We have a running joke that says every time we went to the voters, we'd say only 11% more, and then the next election only 9% more, and there was this back and forth between the voters, like, oh, next time you guys are going to come tell us 5% more, and we said that's exactly it. We're getting closer and closer. But that 9%, there was something about it that was tangible, and so our whole election campaign, coming out of COVID, coming out of the riots, coming out of a really bad time for the country, was about hope. And it was local hope. We said we built a wall around this municipality, because inevitably when there's congresses and national elections and all these things, there's a lot of noise, a lot of things that actually don't matter in people's lives. And we did that. We built a proverbial wall, and we just spoke about local issues to local people in their homes, wherever they were, and we made politics and elections relevant to people locally. And that's how we managed to get over the line.
Jy het nou verduidelik van die groot getal vrywilligers wat gehelp het tydens die verkiesingsveldtog. Maar dink jy die feit dat jy Zulu praat en so goed Zulu praat en ook die idioom en die kultuur verstaan van Zulu sprekende mense het enigstens gehelp?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have a huge trust deficit between people in South Africa, for obvious reasons. And being able to connect with someone without having a translator, specifically between two races that historically have missed or been caused to mistrust each other, really did help. Being able to listen and understand, listen and respond, to being able to participate in social media discussions on forums where it's only in isiZulu. Those things help. Breaks that barrier, which is very difficult. I mean, you can deliver the best services. You can build the biggest bridges, clean up the most. But if a voter doesn't trust you, if someone doesn't trust you intrinsically, not just voting, then they're not going to empower you to represent them. So you have to build trust first before you can tell people how many potholes you're going to fix and all the rest of it.
Wat het jy aangetref toe jy instap by hierdie munisipaliteit na die ANC dit van 94 af regeer het?
A mess. No money, demotivated staff, some very horrible staff as well, in terms of skills and culture and all sorts of things. A municipality that had no capacity to deliver basic services. We look after 1,500 square kilometers. We had 2 brush cutters. We had no functional tractors. We're supposed to collect refuse for 109,000 people. We had 2 working refuse compactors. We owed Eskom, we had 20 million rand in outstanding loans that were taken to pay salaries at some stage. So it was a mess. No vision or direction, which people just came to work and were just doing something, but no real direction and movement in a way forward. So that's when we found when we got here, a council that was quite divided. So as an opposition party, I mean, I wasn't in the council, but the DA as an opposition party was very, very robust, and it created quite a harsh council environment when the ANC was in government. And the ANC was split down the middle as well. They were fighting themselves at the time around corruption and COVID-19 expenditure and all those things. So we had a toxic council that was unable to really function or be coherent or at least agree to disagree. It was horrible. Which is important. I mean, you just because you're from different political parties doesn't mean that everything has to be a battle and uncomfortable and you're enemies. So that was the situation when we got here. A municipal manager that was suspended but tried to come back. So our first meeting where we were being sworn in, she was suspended for 19 million rands of COVID corruption, but she decided to invite herself to our inaugural meeting to try and swear us in. So the DA collapsed the council meeting because we were the majority. We said we can't let someone who's here illegally swear us in. Luckily, someone from the legal fraternity said, actually, this is all just pomp and ceremony. What you need is to do an oath of office in front of a magistrate. So the DA and the EFF, because they were clueless. They really had no support, the poor EFF councillors. They tagged along with us and we went to the local magistrate, and the magistrate signed us into office. So while the ANC thought they had won their first battle in the council chamber, we were all being sworn in with the EFF in the magistrates court, and were immediately able to make decisions as the legitimately sworn in councillors, while the ANC were still, they hadn't been sworn in, so they weren't actually elected yet. So yeah, there was those fun things that happened in between. Not a good place.
Jy het nou verduidelik, toe jy begin het, was daar ook amptenare, ek dink in Helen se autobiografie Not Without a Fight, verduidelik sy wat sy in Kaapstad aangetref het, en om van onbevoegde en korrupte amptenare ontslae te raak, baie moeilike proses, klink dit vir my as ek nou reg verstaan. Wat was die eerste ding wat jy besluit het om te doen? Was dit om capable mense aan te stel?
So, yeah, it's... people think it's like an American movie. Some guy in a suit and lots of cars rocks up and, shouts a whole lot of things and they happen. there's labor law and there's other things that you have to follow. So it's not quite so easy. So it's not as simple as getting in there and say you're fired and you're fired and you're fired and then putting your own people in there. The first thing was to make sure that the municipality was stable. So regardless of a change of political party, this beast of an organization still had to work. And the officials were obviously on edge because this was the first time political power had changed, since democracy. So the first was just to calm things down, to say, everyone, things might have changed political hands, but the government is still intact and things can still happen. Then it was to diagnose where the biggest problems are. Supply chain, HR, contract management, your big projects, your infrastructure projects. Because what you don't want to do is just run in with a bulldozer in there and then the whole system collapse and you aren't able to deliver services. Big metros take forever. That's why when you look at places like Johannesburg and Nelson Mandela Bay and eThekwini and all these places, it's going to take 30 years to get them anywhere near, somewhere functional because of how big they are. So what we did is that I used to call it the hit list, but I realized in KZN you can't call it the hit list because that has connotation. So we ended up calling it the You're Not Invited to Christmas list, where we identified problem individuals because they're quite literally people who are obstructive in the system. They're usually around supply chain, HR, all of those places that I've mentioned. Supply chain is where contracts are manipulated and people get money and those sorts of things. And HR is where cater deployment takes place. But first and foremost is to have a municipal manager who's on board with your vision. So before we could deal with the corruption, before we could deal with the fraud, the historical irregular expenditure, municipal manager, key departments, and then was to set a vision that we could then actually hold people accountable to. So I don't care which political party you voted for in the past, but this is what we want all the refuse to be collected, and this is how we want it to be done. If you don't execute, leave. So it's objective, and you're trying to start to remove the politics from the administration.
En om die kultuur te swaai binne die munisipaliteit, ek meen letterlik van mense wat straat te vee en op die vullishope werk tot hier in die munisipale bestuur.
Yeah, that's very difficult, and I think just generally human behavior has been one of the hardest things, or human culture has been one of the hardest things to change, whether it's in the community itself or in the municipality. But I think it was so broken that just giving a little bit of direction helped to kickstart a change, and then it was to manage that change, making sure that people had a voice was important because people had never had a voice before. Making sure that you held people accountable, so that you started that cultural change of accountability, not targeting people, but making sure that people knew that there was a system in place now. If you don't do your work, this is what happens. To remove this thing that there are people who are protected within the system, which happens under the ANC. There are municipal officials, junior municipal officials, who are more powerful than the mayors and the speakers of their councils because of the political position that they hold in their parties. So to remove that, to actually care about the working conditions of the employees, basic things. Do you have uniforms? What does your office look like? When last was it painted? We had paint peeling off the walls and lights flashing, while people are trying to work and things like that. So to actually treat your employees as professionals, give them the good working environment so that they buy into this, to what you're trying to do. So we're still doing that. Performance management is a scary thing in government, so people don't like to be performance managed. That's still ongoing. Accountability, generally, and I don't know what it is, maybe it's a cultural thing here in KZN, people don't like conflict in the workplace. So senior managers don't like to pass on accountability. So, I end up being the bad guy a lot of the time because in trying to create that, you have to force them to do these things where there is wrongdoing or something hasn't happened or didn't go according to plan. So I think those are the two hardest things that we're working on now is performance management and cascading accountability beyond just the municipal manager and the directors. But it was difficult and is difficult to do.
Jy het nou gesê 'n stad, groot metro soos Durban of Johannesburg gaan 30 jaar vat om reg te kry. Jy is nou amper 5 jaar die burgemeester einde van die jaar wanneer daar weer verkiesings is. Wat sien jy in die 5 jaar gebeur in uMngeni?
So I think the important thing is, one, creating an institution that lasts after you, right? Because I'm only going to be mayor for 5 years, maybe 10, but even that, it needs to last. So it's this realization that you can do quick projects. It's very easy. Politicians love cutting ribbons. So you can take 5 million rand, build a hall, cut the ribbon and say, great, I've done that. But there's no road to the hall, there's no electricity, there's no water, and the community around there, 90% of them is unemployed. So the one is to create a system and an institution that lasts longer than you. And many of those things you can't actually see. It's making sure that the standard operating procedures, the council culture, the policies, the law, the bylaws, all of those things are in place, things that the public don't see but make any institution, big institution, work. I mean, Johannesburg's big and we're far away from their size, but we are a 650 million rand budget. We do have 1.3 billion rands worth of assets. We have 280 permanent employees. It's not a small business to run. But then there's the visible things, taking the roads budget from 11 million to 35 million, to delivering sort of 70 billion rand electricity infrastructure in certain areas, to re-establishing a parks department. We had no parks department. I told you we had 2 brush cutters and 4 broken tractors. But we now have a parks department with employees and a manager and tractors and specialized equipment for the sports fields and all of those sorts of things. To rebuild confidence between the public and the municipality. I often say to them, to the employees, I don't want any member of the public to say the municipality. Even if they're angry with us, they must say our municipality, because that's what it is. It's their municipality. A functional council. I talk about how important that is. You know, in the last financial year, the ANC passed our budget because they were happy. I mean, we consulted, we spoke, we listened. We couldn't give everyone everything, same as the community, but they could see their inputs represented as representatives of their communities. We don't have to. We're a majority here. We could bulldoze our way through here if we wanted to. But before we could even blink, the ANC councillors moved and passed our budget, and the EFF voted for it as well. And the DA councillors were sitting there saying, well, they passed the budget for us. You know, that's unheard of in this municipality. To buy into contentious programs like electricity disconnections and electricity theft. So it's a maturing of the institution on top of all the other, the smaller, I don't call them smaller, but the visible things that people see.
Is die geldsake ook nou beter?
Much better. It's still very challenging. We have huge electricity losses because of electricity theft. We've got a program in place now that we're rolling out slowly, but again, it's cultural change. If people have been told for 30 years that electricity is for free, and you have to come there and tell them, actually, no, we don't know where this started, but it's definitely not for free, it's pushback, and it's cultural change, and it's human beings. Everything's getting more expensive for everyone out there, so you try and cushion your residents. So just because it's getting more expensive in South Africa and the cost of living doesn't mean that we must try and be a part of that to make life more difficult. So we have the biggest basket of free basic services out of any municipality in KwaZulu-Natal, and that is in recognition of no matter where you are in our municipality, we want to assist you. We have a lot of people with fixed income. There are a lot of elderly residents, you know, so they're not going to get a bonus at the end of the year. They've got their pension and that's what they've saved to make life easier for them. And then it's just the growing demands of service delivery, whether it is every summer the rain washing the roads away. It never stops. The old infrastructure doesn't get solved in 5 years. In Joburg it might be 60, 30 years. Here it's the same. We've got the same budget. Yeah, so a lot's been done, but the money situation has improved. There's still a lot of pressure in terms of what we need to do and where we want to be. But I remind myself that, we've been here for a couple of months, really, and there's still a long way to go.
Ek het gesien met die vorige sensus, die gemiddelde inkomste van Hilton en Howick veral is nogal hoog. Is dit moeilik om ryker gebiede te bestuur as armer gebiede?
No, not necessarily. The pressures are different, I guess, for those communities. The demands are different as well, and they also carry a larger burden on behalf of other areas. We have huge rural areas and things like that. So, yeah, I guess it's a bit in between.
En julle verhouding met die district-munisipaliteit?
So, the district-municipality relationship hasn't really changed. They are supposed to do a whole lot of services that they don't, and people don't understand, whether it has got to do with the army or the police or the hospital or water or whatever it might be. They know they voted for the mayor and their local councillor, so people don't really care. they just know that they know you. So the district municipality, we get a lot of pressure for the things that they're not doing: fire and rescue, water and sanitation, those sorts of things. But we haven't got an antagonistic. It's not as if we fight with them all the time. They're just a little bit useless. So you can't rely on them in most of the cases. We do have one trump card, and you mentioned in your last question, or alluded to it, is that the district municipality makes money out of this municipality because they sell water to Hilton and to Howick in particular, and that is something like 60 or 70% of their income as the district. So they know we can make their lives more difficult if they're completely useless. Provincial, I don't want to be controversial, but I don't really know what the provincial government does for us. It's a level of government that I think you could do without. I'm sure we could be much more responsive to fixing schools and roads and doing all the things that the provincial government does. Very hostile before 2024 elections. We're the only DA-run municipality in the province, so you can imagine they were always out to get us for different... We called it love letters. They always used to write us love letters about things that they were alleging that we were doing and not doing and whatever. We've become less of a focus for anyone at the moment. The IFP doesn't get many votes here, and the provincial minister of Cocta is an IFP, so they're not really focused here. They're focused in Zululand. The ANC did so badly that 6,000 votes that they got here is not important. They're focusing on eThekwini and Pietermaritzburg and those places where they get hundreds of thousands of votes, and they need to rebuild there. And then the DA ministers or MECs, their portfolios are not largely linked to local government. So the MEC for finance, they don't give us any money. It comes through Cocta, and then at a public works level, I suppose we've worked well in terms of releasing land and things like that. But the provincial government, I'll leave my comments there.
Politiek is brutaal en dit kan baie lelik raak, en daar was 'n openbare beskermer ondersoek gewees oor jou en 'n toerismefonds en na beweringe voormalige verloofde, maar die openbare beskermer het nou baie onlangs 'n uitspraak gelewer in die ondersoek.
Yeah, so I stood for Premier of the province in 2024 under my political party, and a week after I was announced the candidate, these allegations came up. We had dealt with them as a council a year before that. ANC, all of the political parties were happy with the outcomes and everything, but obviously it was thrown in there to win political points, and so it started. First it was another council investigation, was cleared. Then the provincial government, they jumped on because it was still ANC at the time. Unfortunately, I'm sure to their great disappointment, there was nothing, and they had to clear me as well. And then recently the public protector as well. So you can imagine this started in 2024, and at the end of 2025 this comes out. So it's a thing that just lingers on. In 2025 the public protector said that every single allegation that was made was unsubstantiated and there was no evidence. It's disappointing because it really does, it disheartens people who are actually invested in their communities and want to do good from getting involved in politics because of all the nonsense that you have to put up with, as you've said. But yeah, I guess if you haven't got anything to hide and you haven't done anything wrong, then there's nothing to be scared of. It's just the constant dragging through the social media and the media and whatever it might be, when you're actually trying to do your best. That's politics. You grow a tough skin and you move on.
Die politieke tektoniese plate het geskuif in 2024 in KwaZulu-Natal, veral met die ANC en MK party wat opgekom het. Nou lê daar weer 'n verkiesing voor. Het julle al peilings gedoen? Hoe lyk die situasie in uMngeni op die oomblik?
So firstly, the results for this municipality were interesting. On the provincial ballot, we won, and we presume that's because I was the premier candidate, people of this area could relate to me in all the different communities. So it was almost like, here's our homeboy kind of thing. And then on the national ballot, we lost to the MK by like 80 votes or something like that. So a very, very close result. But also, very, very interestingly, is the highest voter turnout in KZN, which was very interesting. We had 70% voter turnout in this municipality for a national election. But yeah, you're right. We have done some polling. It was the beginning of last year. Because it was a local poll, the results are quite different. We are confident that because it is a local election and not a national or provincial election, that we will retain the municipality. Mainly because, one, you can refer to things that you've done here. Two, you're not voting for Jacob Zuma or Mr. Thabisa or Mr. Steenhuisen or whoever. You're voting for your local councillor and your local mayoral candidate. So it's people that you can quite literally knock on their door. You're having a drink at the pub with them or whatever. It's relatable people. Three, because we've got a very good election apparatus in this area. A lot of what the DA does at a national level, we call it sandboxing it here. They test pilot it here, and then they go up to a national level because we have those strong foundations. Yeah, I think it's about local. So we can also we can talk about those things. So we are confident, but MK definitely a spanner in the works. I keep telling my caucus members and the party members here locally, MK is not a threat to us. They don't take our votes. They take the ANC votes and the EFF votes. MK is a threat to those parties, not to us in terms of votes. But we can be a threat to them and the ANC because we can take their votes and we are taking both those political parties' votes. So it's just a mindset shift to see things as an opportunity rather than a threat. The threat for us is turnout. Is when people get their election date and they can see they can make a long weekend out of it, and everyone buggers off to the beach or wherever it is, and we won by 42 votes. So if 42 people decide that they're going to go have a braai or go to the dam or whatever it is on the day, then we can lose the municipality.
Ek wil net 'n bietjie bly by MK en die provinsiale regering wat hierso nou weer in die weegskaal is met die NFP wat soort van onttrek en nie onttrek nie. Mens weet nou nie lekker presies waar dinge staan nie. Hoe lees jy die situasie op provinsiale vlak binne die politieke kultuur in KwaZulu-Natal?
So, I mean, firstly, I think that there are members of the NFP who are just want a position. They've probably been made promises along the way, whether it is to get certain municipalities or certain positions or whatever it might be. Ambassadorships have been spoken about, and their factions within the NFP are now feeling left out because they've got one MEC and their political party as a whole is not necessarily benefiting from this GPU. That's on the first instance. The second is that the MK, because they have this constant turmoil at a national level, and you can see in the polling that's been done, they're almost constantly declining, or they've sort of stabilized at quite a low percentage. In this province, the ANC is recovering, not to their previous numbers, but they are recovering. So because they don't sit in government anywhere, and they don't have many councillors, they lack the ability to create relevance for themselves in communities. Whereas now ANC councillors are mobilising, IFP, DA, NFP councillors are mobilising for the local election, and they don't have these structures. They have promises and people competing for positions that don't exist. So for them, the biggest opportunity to get into government and have power somewhere is here in KZN. They've got no chance in any other province or at a national level, but here in KZN. So they will push to try and get that power so they can show some sort of legitimacy. But they're also running out of funds. So for them, their model, just like the ANC has realized that it's an unsustainable model to build their political party on, is that you cannot build a political party that is funded by the state over the long term and then lose an election or don't have political power and then think it's going to be sustainable. So they need to fund their election, and unless global political situation changes and South Africa becomes relevant to certain individuals again, or has some sort of power, then they're not going to get the funding that they used to from the international backers. So they need that relevance, and they need access to state power and state resources to be able to sustain themselves into the next local government election. It's an interesting situation in terms of the numbers, because the legislature is made out of 40 people, and it's at the moment it's 40-40 in terms of the numbers. If the MEC or if the NFP removes their person, it becomes 39-40. It's still not enough to move things forward. To pass a budget in the council, in the legislature, you need 50% plus one, and the speaker doesn't have a deciding vote. So there's all these dynamics to be able to have a motion of no confidence. It's 50% plus one. So you get to a point where, when do they have to pass their budget? End of April, provincial government has to pass their budget. So you get to a situation where if they don't pass their budget and they haven't been able to sort out their issues, you can find yourself with KZN provincial government being dissolved or the legislature being dissolved and us having a provincial election on as well as because it has to be within 90 days. So there's those dynamics. Because it's so close in terms of numbers, there are certain casting votes that people don't have. Yeah, it becomes very messy, but we do hope that all the discussions that are happening between the different political parties lead to something more positive for the province. I tell you, there'll be nothing worse than having an MK government in KwaZulu-Natal. You'll see corruption and fraud and catered appointment and whole-scale gangster state like you've never seen in this country before, and at a rapid pace, because there'll be Mindar before that local government election that they need to secure enough results to be able to project them forward and show that they're not a cope, they're not a once-off political party that just exists for one election round.
Is MK se enigste aantrekkingskrag Jacob Zuma?
No. I think it is a big factor, but it is not necessarily the only draw card that they have and the only thing that they have. I think the MK feels like home to a lot of voters whose home has sort of distanced them for a long time. So the ANC has been home to the vast majority of voters since the dawn of democracy, and it's a very broad church. Communist ideologies, liberal, people who are religious to those who are not. It's a very broad church, workers, etc. And there's been nothing that sounds like or feels like home. And just in the name Mkhonto weSizwe feels like something familiar, something nostalgic, something that is a safer bet than going from ANC to IFP, who is traditionally a staunch opponent, or to the DA, who is going to bring back apartheid, apparently. Like all these things that are in the voter's mind. So the MK just sounds and feels like home, which the EFF never did. The EFF was never an ANC trying to be a better ANC. The MK is saying, well, we're trying to be a better ANC than what the ANC was supposed to be. So yeah, I think that's the threat, is the inability of the voter to find somewhere that feels like home in KZN, and the MK feels like home even if it's got its problems.
Om in KwaZulu-Natal 'n politikus te wees is seker een van die gevaarlikste beroepe wat jy kan hê. Julle hoofsweep in die uMngeni-raad, Nhlalayenza Ndlovu, 2 jaar terug is hy in 'n sluipmoord aanval vermoor. Enigiemand wat in Howick kom en die munisipaliteit ken, of net die dorpe ken, sal weet dit is 'n kleinerige gemeenskap, dis nie reusagtig nie. So dit moes 'n reusagtige invloed gehad het op julle.
Yeah, we're not used to political violence here as well. This area of KZN. So the political violence, the talks of izinkabi or assassins, planned hits, all of these things is not a common language to this particular area. Even our next door neighbours, Msunduzi, Pietermaritzburg, as staunchly fierce as the ANC and the MK and the IFP are there's not all of this. So when it did happen, it did send a shock through the system here. And I think even the way in which the councillors interacted with each other and spoke to each other on social media and things like that between political parties changed, because people realized that it's not play. These conversations that we have. And although I don't think it wasn't an ANC hit or anything like that, I think it's largely linked to a criminal who's been arrested for 3 charges of murder, and that is the local chief. There was still that respect between political parties to say, okay, well, we need to deal with this issue. There's a deeper sickness in the community that's come from this individual and the elements that he's brought, and I think we've done that quite well. And I guess that would be Nhlalayenza's legacy, is as tragic as it was, but there's a realization that we actually need to work together to rid ourselves of those things, whether it's extortion of communities, whether it's illegal sale of land, whether it is all these different things that happen, the black market, as per se, that exists parallel to the state that we're trying to build.
Jy het self ook al doodsregimente gekry. Jy moes al trek tussen huise en 'n paar aande nie op dieselfde plek slaap, die routine verander en so aan.
Yeah, not so much anymore. But in the beginning, you can imagine now the council's completely changed. There are contractors who are worried about how they're going to keep stealing. There are government officials who are worried about when we're going to start investigations and things like that. elements of the ANC who were trying to push back by destabilizing communities, creating protests at the time. So, where I was living wasn't necessarily secure. I was staying on a farm, a little farm cottage out in one of the areas, and the police said, no, need to move. So, because my landlady was, she was at home one day with her mother, black lady as well, and people came up and they said, no, we're looking for the mayor. He apparently lives here, and I wasn't there at the time, but it was just random things like that. People coming to look for me in the middle of nowhere. Police said, no, you need to move. Moved again. Police again came after more of these incidents, said you need to move. And then eventually, because it's expensive to move, and councils at a very small municipalities don't earn enough to be constantly moving and all of these sorts of things. I was very fortunate, and in summer we have some big estates here, like you alluded to earlier, and many of the homes are empty. They're holiday homes, or kids are at school. So some of the estates let me stay in some of the empty houses. They chat to the owners, and we stayed there. But yeah, I guess that was part of the resetting of the municipality, making sure that those things were dealt with. And now, touch wood, it's I'll go in my plakkies to Spar, buy like a normal person, sit at the local pub, whatever it might be, drive through the township, stop, buy slap chips from someone. So it's quite normal now. Obviously, like I said before, you've always got to be vigilant. You've always got to be situationally aware. Don't do stupid things. But yeah, much better now.
So jy is nie bang nie?
No, I don't have reason to be. If I was stealing money from the municipality and I had to keep looking over my back, or if I was being completely unfair, or if I was involving myself in tender processes to benefit family and friends, and I can see why people get themselves into trouble. It's easy to see, but you're not doing anything to put yourself in that position. You're not creating the environment for that to happen. What is the saying? Guns attract guns. So don't put yourself in a place where you're going to attract that.
Hoe belangrik is dit vir 'n burgemeester, vir raadslede, maar veral vir 'n burgemeester om in die gemeenskap rond te beweeg? Jy sien daarom Morero nooit, maar hoe belangrik is dit om rond te beweeg?
We are elected by the people for the people.
En doen jy dit?
100%. It's, like I'm saying, I will run through my community and people stop and have a chat with me. I never get to run very far, but that's what happens. I'll walk along the river and people will stop and, chat with them in the local shopping centres. There's places along the road here that sell food. So for lunch, I'll walk across the road and buy a boerie roll. It's important. The sports days, the other day there was a protest by some of the environmentalists at the magistrates' court around illegal poaching or poaching. Be there. We forget as politicians where we come from, and you have to be part of that part of the community. My deputy mayor is much better at it than I am. I'm generally an introvert, so I have to force myself to do it. I wouldn't even do it if I was the mayor. But my deputy mayor is much better at that. He's always out at the pubs chatting with the guys. He's a lot better of a people's person than I am. So we complement. I'll do his admin for him.
Wat dink jy van Helen Zille as die burgemeesterkandidaat vir Johannesburg?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think in terms of capabilities, Helen is exactly what Johannesburg needs. Iron lady who's not going to take anyone's nonsense, who has no vested interest other than to see the city work. She's detached from the political nonsense there, whether DA or council or employees or anything. So it's almost, you're bringing someone and the only thing that they want to do is fix it, and actually to prove that they can fix it as well. So someone who's determined. She's got a lot of hard work to do. She hasn't got those networks. She grew up there, but I think people in Joburg are wanting just someone who can fix things. Someone who's not talking too much about stuff that's happening out there in the media, but just wants to fix things. You could always ask questions about why not someone from the Johannesburg DA caucus, but everyone had the opportunity to apply. So I guess that's the process, like we'll have a process here. But I think it throws a real spanner in the works for Gauteng. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens in Johannesburg.
Watter rol speel ras in Suid-Afrika in die DA, jy weet, DA se liberale party tog kry hulle dit reg om in KwaZulu-Natal van alle provinsies 'n verkiesing te gewen het 5 jaar terug.
So I don't think we can ever divorce, or not in the near future at least, race discussions from politics in South Africa. I think it's far too complex a country to be able to just dismiss conversations around race and also ethnicity, sort of nuances within races. Zulu, Xhosa, English, Afrikaans, whatever it might be. There's nuances within nuances. But it is important discussion. There are historical imbalances, not just black and white on white, that need to be resolved. There are tribal issues that need to be resolved. So for me, you can't be colorblind. That doesn't mean that you have to support things like BE and I don't believe in that, and I don't think we should support that. But I do think that if you're not having a discussion around redress that says, okay, well, there is a racial element to it, then you are ignoring the reality. I also think that there's something around identity, right? That's been created, artificial or not, in South Africa. So race is often linked with identity. And although I'm a white man, I don't speak for all white men. And although Helen Zille is a white woman, she doesn't speak for all white women or white people. But that's the assumption. That is the political environment that we work in. And to completely dismiss it is not going to change it. You have to work with it and through it, and that needs to be our legacy, is to say, how do we use this space, this time, the stability that we have in our democracy to work through it so that in 60 years' time, in 100 years' time, it is less influential, identity, race, in South African politics. The recognition of race doesn't necessarily mean racism. There's racism and there's recognition that there are different colored people. And I think that's where people get very upset. As white people, we get very defensive. When we start talking about race, we automatically think racism. There's racism, and that exists black on black, white on white, black on white, etc. And then there's race, the recognition that this artificial construct of having different color skin has been used in one way or another over time by different people in power to do different things, economically, socially, whatever it might be. And we can have those discussions without being completely confrontational, completely dismissive, completely colorblind.
Het jy 'n gunsteling politikus of 'n politikus wat jy bewonder?
I don't consider myself a politician, so I don't really look up to other politicians. I know I operate in the environment. But I guess Angela Merkel is one person, so the former Chancellor of Germany, a person who had to adapt skills that she didn't have. She wasn't a very social person, but she was a very good manager. But she had to be a social person because that's what Germany demanded of her at the time. A person who was dealing with a very difficult change management between East and West Germany, the haves and the have-nots, the rurals and the urban. The pillar that she had to represent during Donald Trump's first presidency, when the Western world needed a leader because suddenly, Obama had gone and they needed someone. And Germany, or Angela, emerged as a calm, centered voice in the political world to, calm the Trump craziness. So I think there's a lot that I can maintain. Also maintaining a family, so she did all of this and still, her and her husband and her family and her roots, where she came from, remembering all of that, not losing that, being proudly German, but also being open to new ideas that at the time were unpopular, but, moved Germany forward. So yeah, I think Angela Merkel is probably someone I look up to. Not that I've ever met her, but yeah.
Wat is die grootste fout wat jy al gemaak het in die politiek?
I think the first one is listening to the opinions of others to form opinions of others. So instead of experiencing another person myself in politics, allowing myself to listen to other people's opinions of others and then forming that same opinion without actually knowing the truth or the real story, or actually just getting to know the person and who they actually are across political spectrums within my own political party. Being too naive and trustworthy. I generally think good of people. So if you tell me something, I'm going to believe it until otherwise otherwise proven. And that's a bit naive in, I guess, the world that we live in today, which is unfortunate, but also in politics and in governance. Not everyone has your best interest in mind, and not everyone has the same vision that you do for the institution or the party or the community that you represent. So I think those are two of my biggest faults, I guess, is too much trust in people that I shouldn't have trust in, being naively so, and then also rumors and just the gossip mill, and the people who talk about people are not who I want to hang out with. People who talk about ideas are the people that I want to hang out with.
Waar was jy trots?
I guess being able to, I mean, my career-wise, is prove that young people are capable. So there's always this dismissive thing about, you must wait until you're 60 in politics to be able to do anything. So I'm proud that myself and my deputy mayor, Sandile, who's 4 years younger than me, we took up a burden much bigger than ourselves. There's not many CEOs and CFOs and all of those sorts of things of 650 million rand companies out there, and we made it work, and we made it work for everyone, and we are leaving something that's better than what we had. So I think that's one thing I'm proud of. And then also my ability to be myself. I mean, I'm not wearing, you're sitting here with me, I'm not wearing a suit and a tie and whatever. I'm wearing my locally made shoes and my jeans that have got a stain on it from my painting, last weekend, and a shirt that was made by some school kid who was doing a project because they were doing fashion design. I mean, that's who I am. Not being scared to let that be represented in my work and the passion for what I do. Yeah, I think those are two things.
Is daar iets waar jy spyt is?
No, I don't think so, no.
Wat is jou doelwit of droom binne die DA, binne die politiek?
Sure. Politics, I don't think I'm going to be involved in. I don't have dreams in politics. I love the built environment. I love seeing broken towns and cities and roads, and I want to see building and cranes and things being fixed and projects being completed. I'm a complete SimCity nerd. I love those sorts of things. If you look at my YouTube history, it's all the building programs of the line in Saudi Arabia, and what are the 5 biggest building projects this year in the world. And so I don't think I have dreams and aspirations in politics. I definitely not, but not in the DA, as in I don't want to be a leader of any sorts. That's not where my strengths lie, or my passions, or my insanity. But yeah, I think somewhere in some sort of administrative role where I can utilize the skills that I've learned over the last 5 years to try and fast track development in whatever format that looks like.
Chris Pappas, baie dankie dat ons vandag met jou kon gesels. Dit was baie interessant en baie insiggewend. Baie dankie.
Thank you for having me.
Elke Dinsdag gesels ek met nuusmakers, planmakers, bekendes en berigtes. Laat weet ons wat jy dink in die kommentaarveld onderaan hierdie pot gooi, of stuur 'n e-pos aan info@rsg.co.za. Onthou om die follow knop hierbo te druk en kom gesels elke Dinsdag, land en sand.